Thank you for listening to Depictions Media Radio. Welcome to Policy and Rights, the show about government policy and human rights. Welcome back to Policy and Rates here at Depictions Media Radio. I'm your host, Michael Clogs. We're going to listen to a friend of mine, Samer Bayan, as he is going to speak with another friend about what is happening in South Lebanon. And there are some interesting points that Ahmed Chenad is going to bring up in that Israel, how they are actually finding their targets, and are at times is Israel targeting what would seem to be Arabic or Muslim journalists in order to protect what they think is the story at hand and what the world should be knowing. So he's also going to discuss some of the strategies that they have put in place that may be preventing some of the Palestinians from returning home. They're civilians, and there are, according to Ahmed, that some of the homes have been intentionally torched so that there is nothing to go back to. That they've torched and burnt certain parts of the land so that people cannot return home, and that everything that they had once is definitely lost forever. So why don't we start off with that story today, as we're going to listen to a friend, Samer, who is in Beirut, as he interviews another friend, Ahmed.
Hello, Ahmed. Can you please introduce yourself and tell us what you do?
In English, huh?
Yes.
Okay, my name is Ahmed Shade. I'm a videographer and a fixer. Especially my work now in journalism in this field now, and I was covering the things that happen in South Lebanon since October 8 till April.
All right. Can you please describe the situation for us? What is actually happening in the south of Lebanon?
Mainly there is a real war that nobody knows about clearly. I don't know why they just fix everything about what's happening between the occupation and the resistance in South.
Can you explain who are the occupiers and who are the resistance?
The resistance now, it's mainly represented by Hezbollah, and there is Amal movement, there is a Syrian Social Nationalist Party, there is the Islamic group, they are Sunni group, and there is there's some of Christians are also there, which is a secular a group for SSMP. And the occupation occupation side, of course, they are the Israeli. The situation is and it's bad, especially for us like journalists or the people, the freelancers, or even the people they work with such companies or agencies like Reuters or AFP or with TVs. Because Israel just killed about 153 journalists in Gaza, or 52 since October 7. So it's not a real safe area to work. In South was the situation different. They targeted like twice the journalist there. In October 13, and then after about 1 month for Al Mayadeen TV. In October 13, they killed Isam Abdullah. He was video journalist for Reuters, and they were targeted also at the same point Al Jazeera group members, and also AFP groups. There is a photojournalist. Okay.
Can you explain, tell us who is Isam Abdullah and what happened to him? Can you tell the story of what happened at that moment?
Okay, Isam Abdullah, he's a Lebanese video journalist, an ambitious one. His age is 37 years old. He's expert in this field because he was before in Turkey, he was in Ukraine, he was in Africa, he was in Syria, in Mosul. So he covers a lot of war zone areas. So he know exactly what he should do in South in such situation. Isam and Al Jazeera group and the AFP and all the people they targeted at that day in 13 of October, they were clearly they were clearly marked as a journalist. They were just wearing a vests and the helmets and everything, and they targeted them in Alma Sha'ab area village, which is in a front line, and the place that where they located was so clear for the Israeli yes, and they decided to target all of them. So, and even what the investigation of Amnesty, Human Rights Watch, everything that they documented at that moment, especially the videos that Isam take before a couple of minutes of his death, he was like archiving everything about the location of the other journalist and his location, and the clear situation, even the tank that was located on the Israeli location, and even the camera of AFP for Dallin Collins. His name is Dallin Collins. He's a video journalist also for AFP. He was recording everything, and we just witnessed in the video how the Israeli they targeted them.
Could it have been a mistake, or why would they have been targeted specifically if they were journalists?
For me, like there is like a plan to cover the real thing. The journalist job is to say what is happening, what's really happening. So the Israeli won't be able to accept this. They killed about 150 civilian journalists in Gaza. They killed Isam here and Farah Omar. I just missed the other guy with the Mayadeen. He's retired also. We appreciate his work also, and yes, they are clearly knows. The Israeli they have a lot of technology and smart devices and everything, and everyone knows that they have the access for satellites and everything. So they know they are journalists, even though the journalists in South usually they take an action to tell the UN and the United Nations there and Hezbollah group, maybe, I don't know, but in Hezbollah, it's their area. They know they are journalists. And also for the Lebanese army, and everything it's documented in the report for Amnesty and the Human Rights Watch and the High Court of Lahai. So everything was clearly that they detain Israel for the committing this crime was clear.
Okay, can you tell me the level of destruction this war is causing in the south of Lebanon right now?
يعني for a couple of months they mentioned that the villages in south, not a huge villages, they are like a small villages with not a high population. It's like a medium rate of population there, but the destruction in عيت الشعب, in Blida, in كفر كلا, لخيام, all these areas, like there is a place it's wiped, like Blida or عيت الشعب or علم, near علم الشعب and Nakura village. All this villages, the destruction, it cost about, they said it cost about maybe $4 billion till now. So it's a huge number for like a separated places or separated locations or villages in South Lebanon. And they mean it to make this, because they think that according to 1701, which is
that is the United Nations Resolution 1701.
It's about the depth of that Hezbollah should move. It's inside Lebanon, about 5 kilometers inside Lebanon. They should be away from the borders about 5 kilometers. So they are targeted every single thing inside this 5 kilometers, and they use like the white phosphorus to burn all the trees, to burn to prevent the people to come back and to go back to their natural life and the neutral life, like to be a farmers, they burned a thousand of olive trees in South Lebanon. So it's like a plan for Israeli to do all of this.
Right. One last question. I mean, living in Beirut and the rest of Lebanon, it feels that nothing's happening. There's no war. Everybody is out on the streets, partying all the time. There are events everywhere. Why is that?
Look, according to my opinion and about what I read, it's like an equation. It's a new equation. In the past, when anyone just want to do anything for the occupation forces in South or in Palestine, I think the Israeli was response in a very fast way and in a heavy destruction way to target directly Beirut or a central unit for electricities and blah 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 blah. But now the equation it's different, because Hezbollah and other resistance group in South Lebanon, and they have like a lot of rockets, a smart one, drones. They can affect deeply the result of the war. It's not, the Israeli is not they are not know much what it will cost them. Yes, before 2 days Hezbollah just launched about 200 Katyusha rockets and the Grad rocket, about 20 military drones. And there is the life in the north of occupied Palestine was just stopped. The trains, there is a lot of fires everywhere, and the society there, they are not prepared to face things like what Hezbollah have. That's it.
Okay, but if I may follow up on that question, I understand that you're saying that Hezbollah is causing a deterrent to Israel, which is why they're not attacking the rest of Lebanon.
Of course, it's a matter of power. It's a matter of resistance power. Because if they can target, they just mentioned, if they target Beirut, we can target Ben Gurion. If they target the airport in Beirut, we can target Ben Gurion airport. If they target Beirut in a clear way, we will target Tel Aviv.
All right. Wonderful that you answered this question. But the other part of the question is, why is the rest of Lebanon pretending as if there's nothing happening in the south?
it's not pretending. For me, there is like a two group of people here living in Lebanon, and it's clearly divided since 30 or 40 or 60 years ago. There is a people that they believe that they want to resist, especially South people, and there is when you are away from South, the situation of course will be different. It's same like Ukraine. If you are in Mykolaiv, there is something in Mykolaiv, and if you are living in a cave, maybe the situation will be different. The people they living in the Israeli occupation forces that or people who occupied Palestine were living in Akka or Tel Aviv. They face less what the settlers face on Gaza Strips or what it's belong to this area, on Naqab or Asqalan or any of these areas. So it's geographically it's away from South, not a lot, and the people they are divided here, and there is two opinions in this country. That's simple as that. Why? Because Lebanon is like that since ever. There is two opinion about this war, and even the people that they related to this war, or they support the resistance, or they are against the Israeli, you can find a lot of them. They live a normal life, but at the same time they are prepared themselves to face what is happening, what will happen in the few months.
All right. Thank you very much, Ahmed.
Okay, we're going to hear from Kristen Hillman, Canada's ambassador to the United States, as she speaks in front of reporters in Washington, D.C. ahead of the 2024 NATO Summit. She faces questions about Canada's defense budget and the fact that Canada's target defense budget is below NATO's defense, and that it's supposed to reach 2% of the national GDP, and Canada's defense budget is actually below that. So then we're going to hear from Bill Blair, as he is going to be speaking with the editor-in-chief of the Foreign Policy at the FP Security Forum in Washington, D.C. He will be speaking with answering questions again about the NATO spending budget, and also he's going to expand on discussions around Arctic security and how important Arctic security is to not only Canada, but also to the United States and other European countries. And he is going to make a statement about climate change and the defense spending in the Arctic, that while Canada holds one of the largest borders on the Arctic Ocean, the fact that it is becoming more and more an ocean and less like an ice block. So it means that it's becoming more and more accessible to other countries, and defense spending should be it should come up as more of a focus in defense spending, as the Pacific and the Atlantic are a major part of those defense mechanisms. So why don't we move forward, and we're going to listen to Bill Blair as he discusses the Canada strategy for defense spending with the Arctic.
Hi, welcome. This seems very low, but I'm sure it's fine. Welcome, everyone. I'm Kirsten Hillman, Canada's ambassador to the United States. Thank you for being here. I was very happy to just greet the Prime Minister at the airport a moment ago, or about an hour ago. We've got obviously a lot of really important meetings here in Washington. The NATO meeting is a little later this week at a time that is critical and important for the alliance. But also we have a number of bilateral meetings with our American friends, members of Congress, members of the administration, business groups, labor groups, and other American allies. So it's going to be a busy and full few days, and we're happy to have you all here.
Madame Hillman, est-ce que c'est un peu gênant pour le Canada d'aller à un autre sommet de l'OTAN sans avoir de plan pour atteindre la cible de 2% en matière de dépenses militaires?
Je dirais pour moi, ici, comme ambassadrice auprès des États-Unis, que les discussions que j'ai sont primairement avec les Américains et l'administration américaine, la colline. Et je peux vous dire certaines choses là-dessus. La première chose, ce qu'on me répète, c'est que les Américains apprécient la trajectoire dans laquelle nous trouvons, une trajectoire en hausse dans nos dépenses. Deuxièmement, le DPU, le projet de défense qui vient d'être mis par le gouvernement, met l'emphase sur l'Arctique et le Moyen-Orient. Et là, les Américains, encore une fois, ils sont très appréciatrices de ça. Ils apprécient beaucoup. Parce que ce qu'ils attendent souvent de leurs alliés, c'est que leurs alliés mettent l'emphase sur des choses où ils ont des capacités et les habilités qui sont leurs propres habilités. Et là, c'est notre territoire un peu en commun avec les Américains, alors ça, ils apprécient beaucoup. Alors ça, c'est très important. Et je dirais aussi, et ça depuis quelques mois, j'entends ça de plus en plus, c'est le leadership que le Canada a toujours démontré vis-à-vis l'Ukraine et l'agression russe en Ukraine. Là, les Américains comptent sur nous. Ils comptent sur nous de rester forts et surtout peut-être dans les moments où dans certains pays, il y a certaines voix qui sont un peu moins fortes qu'on aimerait. Alors ça, c'est vraiment important pour nos collègues américains.
My understanding is that the Americans are sort of losing patience with Canada and not, mapping out sort of a roadmap for precisely how or when we reach the 2%. How is Canada going to sort of explain itself, when it comes under pressure this week from the Americans and probably from other alliance members?
Well, I guess just to say what I maybe a little bit to repeat what I just said in French, with the Americans, there's no question that they are looking for every country to step up as much as they can. And the conversations that I have focus on the fact that they are, in particular, deeply appreciative of the trajectory we're on, the upward trajectory, the precise focus that we have on, in particular, the Arctic and our homeland and ensuring that we have the necessary capacities up there and the capabilities up there. And also our steadfast support for Ukraine, right? And we were there from the beginning, and we have been one of the most vocal and supportive countries, if not the most vocal and supportive within the alliance. And that is a role that we can play that the Americans value greatly because, I think we all know that there are some voices in Europe and even here in North America that are questioning whether or not that continued steadfast support is where we should be. And Canada obviously believes that that's exactly where it should be, and we force that conversation and we press as hard as we can, and we will do so this week.
Ambassador, how does Canada explain to allies why it's unable to even come up with a plan for 2%? When you're in meeting with those diplomats, NATO allies, what are you telling them? They have openly criticized us. What do you say? Is it because of our domestic policies? Is there pushback, you think, from Canadians who may not support 2%? What reasons do you give for not providing a plan?
Well, I think we have to recognize that Canada has made enormous progress in the last number of years, right? We started from a point, I think 7 years ago, 8 years ago, where we were at 1% or below 1%. So with an economy the size of ours, the expenditures that are required to get to where we need to be take time. And also we want to do it in a deliberate way, right? And we want to do it in a way that makes the investments in areas that are going to make maximum benefit for our allies. And so we talk about that. I am not saying that the pressure that you recognize isn't there. It is. But it is also coupled with a strong recognition that Canada is a steadfast ally in all respects, and a confidence that we will continue to be among the most effective allies in the alliance.
Ambassador, have you met with the bipartisan U.S. lawmakers who wrote the open letter to Canada? And what is it that you've said to them to try and assuage their concerns?
So I haven't met with them as a group. I have met with, there's a caucus in Congress called the America-Canada Economic and Security Caucus that is bipartisan, bicameral, and they focus on both economic and security issues. And I meet with them regularly. And I've met with a number of the senators that were in that joint letter who are also members of the ACES caucus. And the conversations we have are not one track, right? I mean, this isn't an issue of just focusing on a number all the time and only that number. We are sophisticated countries with many policies that we're seeking to develop and many ways in which to contribute to not only our homeland security, but the security of our world. So the conversations are not one note. They are complicated, they're serious, and we are taken very seriously there.
Your explanations and with Canada's?
I think they come away with a strong understanding. I think that the United States will always want all of its allies to do as much as they possibly can. I don't think that that's going to change. But I always come away, and I say this because this bilateral caucus that I was talking about, bicameral, bipartisan caucus, that was a creation of U.S. Congress. And it was a creation of U.S. Congress in order to find ways to highlight and double down on the security benefits that the Americans have by being our neighbors. So it was created precisely for these positive reasons. So those conversations, I'm not saying that there aren't issues where we talk in depth about ways in which we would each like each other to do different things, or in a way that is not exactly the way that is unfolding on either side. But the whole premise of the relationship is that together we are, and because we are neighbors, more resilient, stronger, and safer. And so that tends to be the type of conversation that we have without shying away from expectations and talking about expectations.
Mais est-ce que vous craignez un isolement diplomatique, surtout s'il y a un retour de Donald Trump à la Maison-Blanche? Parce que lui, il a dit clairement, moi, je ne vais pas, par exemple, défendre mes alliés de l'OTAN s'il ne paie pas le fameux 2%. Donc, est-ce que vous craignez que le Canada soit isolé? Non. Le Canada se trouve, de mon point de vue, là où je suis, au centre de chaque discussion qui est importante pour nous, pour nos intérêts du Canada et nos objectifs. Alors ça, je ne crains pas, et c'est parce que le fait que nous sommes tellement interliés avec les Américains et avec tout ce qu'ils font à travers ce pays, où qu'ils se trouvent, et quoi que ce soit leur alliance politique, ils mettent beaucoup d'emphase sur la relation qu'ils ont avec nous. Alors, je crains pas du tout. Au contraire, ils sont en train d'essayer de trouver des moyens pour renforcer ces relations. Mais c'est pas honteux que le Canada, c'est pas un peu honteux que le Canada soit le seul pays à pas avoir de plan pour le 2%?
Moi, je suis très fière du Canada. Moi, je suis très fière du fait que nos alliés ici et dans l'Alliance reconnaissent que nous sommes, par exemple, et ça a beaucoup à voir avec les thèmes de la semaine de l'OTAN, nous sommes les défendeurs les plus forts de l'Ukraine. Nous ne bougeons pas là-dessus. Il y a certains qui se demandent, peut-être on devrait avoir un peu moins d'emphase sur cet enjeu. Mais nous sommes toujours là pour pousser, comme on dit en anglais, l'enveloppe. Là, je suis très fière de nous. Je trouve qu'on a une leadership qui est essentielle.
Does it not concern you, though, that by not contributing 2%, you're strengthening the hands of politicians in other countries who want to weaken NATO, and who can then point to countries that they call delinquent as an example of why NATO isn't working for them, and that therefore, in the long run, you're undermining NATO?
So, I'm not the NATO ambassador, and I think those are questions that are probably best placed for those. But what I will say is that there are allies in NATO who are meeting 2%, who do not support standing up for Ukraine and Russia. I think that's a point that deserves emphasis.
Ambassador, I'm meeting tomorrow with Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries. Can you describe what the objectives are for those meetings? What are you looking for? What are those?
And Mitch McConnell.
Oh, Mitch McConnell. Okay, I was going to ask what kind of outreach there was to the public.
Yeah, we're meeting with a bipartisan group in the Senate, a leadership group in the Senate, from the relevant committees and the two leaders. In the House, we are meeting with Hakeem Jeffries because the Speaker wasn't available. We're trying to set up something in the near term for the Prime Minister and him to get in touch, but it's a busy week. So the objectives there are sort of essentially to talk about how this relationship is working, which is, by the way, all-time historic levels of trade and close to historical levels of integration in the history of our two countries, that is founded on a strong and stable and predictable rules-based system that we have with the new NAFTA, the CUSMA, and how we can work together to make sure that we make each other more resilient. And the U.S., and in particular our colleagues on the Hill, but also in the administration, they're very, very interested in ensuring that where Canada can partner with the U.S. and the U.S. can partner with Canada to make ourselves a little less vulnerable to some of the volatility that we've seen in the world in supply chains due to conflict, due to weather, due to, all a variety of different forces. What can we do with each other? So we'll talk about that.
A little bit vague, those topics, but anything specifically on EVs and
EVs, critical minerals, energy transformation, green technology transformation, energy self-sufficiency. I would say we often talk about ways in which we can reinforce business ties. We talk about how we keep our perimeter safe. We talk about the Arctic. We'll talk about Canada's DPU. We'll talk about the ways in which we're doing stuff up there together. So we'll cover the waterfront.
Ambassador, can I ask you a question? Sorry. You mentioned that Canada does a lot that NATO appreciates. But the reality is we're increasingly being cut out of subgroups and organizations that the Americans are working with other allied countries on. We also don't have the same capacity we used to, whether it's sending the fighter jets or ships. We've had to actually pull back because we don't have the equipment. Does that come up with meetings that it's not just about the 2%, but it's also, and I know we're in Latvia and all that, but that it's also about our ability to contribute troops on the ground, which we used to do a lot more.
Well, and then I would point you exactly back to the DPU, right? The 88 F-35s that we're buying, the fact that we are buying the P-8s, the fact that we are working on over-the-horizon radar systems, the fact that we're going to look into submarines, we're going to look into helicopters, we're trying to replenish our forces, by the way, which are all challenges that the Americans and most of our allies have as well, right? We are finding ourselves in a moment in time where having the equipment necessary to do what we need to do around the world is a challenge. So we talk about all of those things, but it is not a Canada-specific conundrum. It is a conundrum and a challenge that we're all facing together.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Bill Blair, you are the Canadian Defence Minister. Welcome to Washington.
Thank you very much, Ravi.
When did you get in?
This morning. I flew up here with my Prime Minister.
Right, so I have the advantage of not being jet-lagged. I'm going to begin with the elephant in the room. This is obviously a week where a lot of NATO leaders are in town, and one of the big themes is 2% of GDP for every single country being the floor, not the ceiling, for defense spending. And Canada's is, I think, at about 1.3% and change.
It is at the moment. I introduced a new defense policy update for my government and with a budget that will see my defense budget rise by 27% next year over this.
My quick math tells me that still takes you to 1.7.
And that's exactly where it takes me. But let me acknowledge to you, NATO's right. Every country, member of NATO, has to do more, and we're committed to doing more. We are also committed to the 2% expenditure at GDP. One of the challenges, I think every defense minister, and I get to meet with them all on a regular basis, it's not just a matter of how much you spend, but it's a matter of spending it well and making sure that you can produce real value for our armed forces, for our NATO alliance and all of our partners, but also for our taxpayers. And I need to be able to demonstrate, I think I've got a very clear path. I know exactly what I need to invest in. I've got to replace my destroyers, my naval ships. I've got to replace our submarines. I've signed contracts for almost 200 new aircraft for my Air Force just in the past year and a half. But I've got to make sure that we can actually deliver on those commitments and create that credibly. You know, I've often said, I think the two great challenges every defense minister has is getting the money and spending the money well. And so all that is to say, Canada understands its obligation. I feel that responsibility gravely, and we're working really hard. The defense policy update that we've just produced moves us forward very substantially and doesn't get us entirely where we need to go. But there are things in that document as well that talks about the investments we know we have to make. Replacing the submarines, for example, creating a new integrated air and missile defense system for Canada's responsibility in North America. All of those things inevitably take me over 2%.
So, but there are people in this town who will say that is a lot of words, and what you're saying is we will be more efficient. The subtext could be that other countries are not. But the criticism still remains. I mean, America's defense spending is way north of 2%.
Yes.
That Canada might be seen as a free rider.
And I have no intention of Canada being a free rider. First of all, we've already made a commitment to NORAD. NORAD is our most important relationship here in North America with the United States. We're investing nearly $40 billion into NORAD modernization, including over-the-horizon radar systems, new satellite systems, a number of very significant capabilities. We understand our responsibility to that relationship. Similarly, in Europe and in NATO, Canada is leading the forward enhanced presence in Latvia. We're making very significant investments there. I'm in complete agreement with my allies that Canada must do more. The day I got this job, I've very publicly taken that position. We must do more, and we will do more. I've got a lot of work to do to make sure that we spend that money well, that we create the capabilities that we require. One of the challenges I'm also facing is we've got some real staffing challenges in the Canadian Armed Forces. I've got to address that problem so I can have sailors on those ships, people to fly those planes, soldiers to do the important work that we're asking them to do. And so all of that work I think we have a very aggressive plan to move forward. I'm very confident that it's going to bring us to that threshold, but I think it also has to be a credible plan. It has to be verifiable to our allies. It can't just be an aspirational approach.
Yeah,
I think you've got to really come out and say, this is what we need to do, and this is how we're going to get it done. And I'm hoping that over the course of the next few days, I'll be able to share that credible, verifiable plan with our allies to provide them with assurances that Canada understands its responsibility, and we're going to live up to our responsibilities.
All right. Well, there'll be a lot of defense ministers in town this week who will ask you that question, and you've previewed your answer. I want to talk about the Arctic as part of, Canada's defense arena and, an increasing priority for NATO. Before I go there, one more elephant in the room.
Of course.
In the last 2 weeks, a lot has happened in the United States. I'm sure you've been watching it closely. There's a greater likelihood that Donald Trump will be president. Anything could happen, but the polls suggest that there's a greater likelihood. This is a former president, potentially a future president, who has called your prime minister two-faced. He has called him a whole bunch of other words as well, and has said he's very disappointed in him. How worried is your government about a potential second Trump term?
I was a minister in government during the first Trump term. I also believe very strongly, first of all, with respect to the American election, I have great confidence in Americans to make whatever decision, and we'll respect whatever decision they may make. But I also know the strength of America, and it includes the White House, obviously, and the president, but it's also the institutions. It's your Congress, it's your judiciary. I've had the opportunity over the course of a very long career in public safety and public security to work very closely with America. I have great confidence in your institutions and the people that lead those institutions. I remain confident. Canada will always be a good partner to the United States, and the United States has been our closest ally and our dearest friend.
Yeah, you really have been doing this for a long time. Very diplomatic. Okay, the Arctic. Talk to me about how you are seeing that as a new arena and the threat of Russia from the other side, as it were?
Well, first of all, when I became the defense minister, most of the work that we had done previously in defense policies, to me it looked an awful lot like a shopping list, and it did not tell our story. It didn't tell the story of Canada. And so when I got this job, and I got my people to start really thinking about what are our real responsibilities. We have obviously responsibilities in Europe and NATO. We have new responsibilities in the Indo-Pacific because we're both an Atlantic and a Pacific nation. But I think most closely related to our identity as a nation is we're an Arctic nation. And I think for very many years, we've relied on the fact that we are surrounded by 3 oceans, one of which was mostly frozen most of the time. And we also had the benefit of a superpower and a very friendly neighbor.
And geography.
And geography.
Amazing geography.
We had remarkable geography. And almost everything the Canadian Armed Forces has done over the last 150 years has been expeditionary.
Right.
It's been, we've never been really invaded as a country. We've had a couple of little incursions, but nothing serious. And so, one of the things that we recognize, though, with climate change in particular, is that our Arctic is becoming far more accessible. And we used to think, I think naively, that maintaining our sovereignty and security in the Arctic was occasionally flying a plane overhead or having a ship go by when the ice was out. But we believe with climate change, first of all, the Arctic is warming at 4 times the global rate. Secondly, the Arctic Ocean, by 2050, could very easily be the main point of passage between Europe and Asia.
That just blows my mind.
And it should. For us, it creates both opportunity and challenge. And what we are seeing among adversaries, Russia and China in particular, is a far more assertive approach into what we have always considered our Arctic. And I know it's a concern for America in Alaska. It's a concern for Greenland and the Danes. It's a concern for our new NATO allies in Finland and Sweden and obviously in Norway and Iceland. But I think the incursions that we're seeing, the effort of China, which now calls itself a near Arctic nation, they're sending ships into the region. They're dual purpose ships, but they're gathering intelligence. They're also working very hard to try to invest in critical infrastructure, our critical minerals. It is a concern to us. And frankly, I believe that we have a responsibility not just to assert our sovereignty, but to be prepared to defend it.
How have things changed in the last year with Sweden and Finland joining NATO?
Very positively, in my opinion. First of all, I've met a number of times with all of the Nordic and Arctic nations. I think what we're starting to see clearly within NATO, there's an obvious and necessary focus on the Eastern Front with Russia. But we're also recognizing the northern frontier of NATO, which is Norway, Finland, Sweden, the Danes, Iceland, us and America, all have a responsibility there. Canada has the largest maritime border with Russia of any country in the world. And frankly, we're not persistently present there. And so one of the things I've come forward with in our new national defense policy is significant new investments in capability to create northern support hubs to build up our domain awareness through over-the-horizon radar investments, but also creating integrated air and missile defense systems, new maritime capabilities, new maritime sensors. Lots of very significant investments are going to be necessary. But I think there's a huge opportunity with Finland and Sweden particularly coming in. Norway's always been a strong partner. An acknowledgement among all the Arctic nations that we can do better together.
Just to come back to the money, because you were talking about investments there, 27% is a lot, right? Have you been able to convince the Canadian population of the importance of these investments? Yeah. Because obviously it takes away from other stuff.
Well, and I'll tell you, when I first got into this job, we did some polling on it, and about less than a third of Canadians really supported defense spending. And it didn't make the top 20 list of priorities. But we've had a very robust conversation with Canadians over the past year. We've talked about not just the risks. Frankly, I don't like scaring people. I'm a police chief, and in my earlier life, and I just don't like making people afraid. But at the same time, you need to make them aware of the challenges that we face and of our responsibilities. And what we've seen just over the past year in Canada, support for defense spending has more than doubled. It's over 65% right now. And it's gone from not on the top 20 list of spending priorities into the top 5. And so I think that the conversation has been a good one with Canadians. There's a good understanding that we have to make these investments, and it's not just. I will confess to you, it's kind of difficult to go and explain to your population that we need to spend this much money to meet a mathematical formula. You've got to talk about why, and you've got to talk about how.
Well, and also the threat is much further away. You're not Poland.
We're not, but the threat's coming to our door. And it's because the Arctic, as I've said, is becoming far more accessible than it was ever in the past. And the nature of technology and conflict is changing as well. And so what we're seeing, we saw with the use of drones, cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, and Iran's attack on Israel. We see it every single day in the Ukraine. And we see it through asymmetrical warfare, which includes cyber attacks. Like all of these things is making our security a greater challenge. And you know, what we understand that we need to do is we need to make our adversaries think twice before they just come and take advantage of the opportunity that exists in North America. I also very mindful of, I have responsibilities to my American colleagues as well. They've made a huge investment in security for the Beaufort and the Bering in Alaska. But right now, there's not an awful lot between Alaska and Greenland, and that's my responsibility, and we're going to live up to it.
They'll be listening to you this week. We haven't talked about China much, but very quickly, you know, in this town, there's been a real shift in attitudes towards China in the last 5 years. Europe, it's a bit more mixed. Where does Canada sit?
I have gone to NATO a number of times. I had a number of conversations. I was in Singapore just last month. I met with the Chinese defense minister. I told him that I've been sending my ships through the Taiwan Strait. We do it with the Americans. We do it with a number of allies because we believe in the importance of defending the principle of freedom of navigation in international waterways. We talked about, actually, I had a very candid conversation with my counterpart about foreign interference in our domestic, in our elections, against our critical infrastructure, some of the cyber attacks that we have seen, which we believe are done either by the PRC or by their proxies. And we talked about, frankly, the coercive activities that they engage in against our citizens who may be of Chinese descent, none of which is acceptable. And I think it's important to have those conversations with them. And at the same time, I think being aware of those risks and responding appropriately. I'm not trying to start a fight, I'm trying to prevent one. And I think by being strong and by being united with our NATO and American partners and in the Indo-Pacific, I think everybody's trying, and certainly in the Indo-Pacific, they're trying to find that place where, you know, between America and China and where the right place to be. I know where my place is in that relationship, and of course it's our closest ally and partners is obviously with the United States. But in the defense of North America, you may recall the Chinese sent surveillance balloons over top of the continent. That was concerning. We've also seen, as I said, dual-use ships going into the Arctic Ocean, and clearly intelligence gathering and mapping. And we've seen a number of efforts that they've made to try to invest in our critical infrastructure. They've done it around the world, but we're taking the steps necessary to defend our interests. And I think there's more to be done. Canada, I believe, has been strong in its response and needs to be even stronger among our allies.
Last question, India. This is an area of great divergence between Canada and the United States. The US and India have been improving their relationship over the last 20 years. Canada's in the last 18 months has declined precipitously. What do you think is going to change? Modi just won another 5 years. It's a difficult relationship. How do you think that's going to change?
It's a difficult relationship, but it's an important relationship. Canada needs India, and I believe India needs Canada as well. First of all, we have a very substantial Indian diaspora in Canada, and it's an important relationship to those Canadians as well. But the trade relationship, I think we've got some work to do. There are some challenges. I think that you'd acknowledge that. There have been some challenges with respect to the actions and the evidence of the Indian government engaging with part of our Indian diaspora in Canada.
This was an assassination, which they deny. You claim that India was responsible.
But at the same time, I would also acknowledge, too, that relationship is an important one. And I think what mature governments do is what we're doing now, is working through that relationship. Yes, they have strong areas of divergence where we just fundamentally disagree. But at the same time, I think we have a responsibility to the future of both of our countries, is to work it out and to find a way to reconcile that so it's mutually respectful. And at the same time, they've got work to do. And I think, by the way, on the defense side, one of the things that I've been encouraging is my military to reach out and maintain those relationships. I think there are opportunities to the extent possible, to normalize the relationship. Now, while we still reconcile the challenges that exist between us, but I think it's very much in my country's national interest and in his interest that we find a way to work through the challenges that we face between us and make it work. And I think that's the responsible, even frankly with all of the difficulties we have with China. I would also acknowledge China as a very significant economic power in this country and an emerging military power as well. It is incumbent upon us to find ways to peacefully coexist and at the same time draw very clear lines about what is acceptable and what is not.
Here's to that. Minister Blair, real pleasure.
Thank you, Ravi.
Okay, we're going to hear from the United Nations with the UN Security Council as we hear a briefing from a special representative of the Secretary General in the Dominican, or should I say the Democratic Republic of the Congo, as the head of the United Nations Organization Stabilization Mission in the DRC as part of MONUSCO on the situation concerning the DRC itself. So why don't we listen in as we're joining them on the Security Council floor.
I now give the floor to Ms. Bintou Keita.
Mr. President, distinguished members of the Council, unfortunately the Speaker's microphone is not working properly. Thank you for this opportunity to present the report of the Secretary General on the Democratic Republic of the Congo. I would also welcome the presence of His Excellency the Permanent Representative of the DRC in New York, Mr. Zeno Mukongo, and His Excellency the Permanent Representative of the Republic of Rwanda, Ernest Arwanmusio. Since my last briefing on the 27th of March of this year, the political dynamic has mostly revolved around the establishment of a new government, which was inaugurated during the night from the 11th to the 12th of June of 2023, following the elections of December 2023. I very warmly welcome the appointment of the first female prime minister in the history of the country, Madame Judith Suminwa Tuluka. The new government, in addition to the prime minister, has 17 women out of 54 ministers, which is a net increase of 27 to 33% of the representation of women, and points to the commitment of the head of state to promoting gender equality in DRC and his efforts as the champion of positive masculinity of the African Union. Since the new government took office and the Bureau of the National Assembly, I had the opportunity of speaking with the Prime Minister, several ministers, and the Speaker of the National Assembly. During these discussions, we were able to discuss the new plan of action of the government and the possibility of support by UNESCO of its implementation in conformity with its mandate.
Of the Council. Just a few days before the election of the Permanent Bureau of the National Assembly on 19 May, armed elements attacked the residence of Vital Kamerhe, leading to the death of 2 policemen in charge of his security. The attackers subsequently breached the premises of the Palais de la Nation. Order was quickly restored, with the Congolese security forces arresting over 50 individuals subsequently charged with participating in the attacks. I condemn in the strongest terms this attempt to destabilize national institutions. The security situation in Eastern DRC has continued to deteriorate, reaching alarming levels of violence and civilian displacement. I am extremely concerned about the rapid expansion of the movement du 23 Mars M23 in North Kivu and the spillover in South Kivu, despite numerous operations conducted by the FRDC, regularly supported by MONUSCO and SAMI DRC. Over the course of the last 2 weeks, the M23 captured several strategic locations in North Kivu, including the town of Kanyabayonga, straddling the Lubero and Rutshuru territories. During their latest military offensive, the M23 and its backers burned several FRDC bases and triggered additional population displacement, further exacerbating an already catastrophic humanitarian and human rights situation. As documented by the group of experts, which reports to the Sanction Committee established by this Council, the government of Rwanda has reinforced its support to the M23, enabling it to make major territorial gains across Eastern DRC. The rapidly escalating M23 crisis carries the risk, the very real risk of provoking a wider regional conflict. In addition to the escalating M23 crisis, a spate of horrific attacks carried out by the ADF, Zaire and Codeco armed groups in Ituri province has caused almost 300 additional victims during the reporting period. Further south, the ADF have also entered Lubero territory in North Kivu on several occasions, killing an unprecedented number of civilians. Between 4 and 7 June alone, more than 90 people were killed in isolated corners of the territory. In South Kivu, the M23 crisis also reached Kalehe territory, with indirect fire hitting Minova and other nearby towns, killing and injuring several civilians and generating further displacement. In the southern part of the province, rumors of M23 infiltration of the Haut Plateau of Uvira, Fizi, and Mwenga have further exacerbated community tensions, which require the urgent attention of government authorities.
Mr. President, distinguished members of the Council, in this complex situation, MONUSCO has continued to provide support to the military operations of the FARDC. Joint operations have contributed to the protection of civilians, especially as far as operations against Codeco and the Mai groups in Ituri. MONUSCO also completed the training of 500 new FARDC recruits in the framework of the new joint FARDC MONUSCO operation called Northern Scalpel. The Springbok operation in defense of Goma and Sake has continued to confront operations of the M23 and is continuing. SAMI DRC has continued its deployment and should reach its full operational capacity by middle of July. And on this opportunity, I would like to express my deepest condolences to South Africa, which lost 2 soldiers on the 25th of June during a mortar attack of the M23 against its base in Sake. I also hope for a prompt recovery to the wounded.
We are witnessing in the DRC one of the most severe, complex, and neglected humanitarian crises of our times. The escalating violence in the East continues to trigger massive population displacement, exacerbating an already dreadful humanitarian situation. Overall, the DRC today counts 7.3 million displaced people, including 6.9 million in the eastern provinces alone. International humanitarian law violations are impeding humanitarian aid delivery. The growing proximity of the front lines and the presence of weapons, including heavy artillery, within and around displacement camps and spontaneous sites significantly compromise the security of the displaced and resident population. At least 15 bombardments have hit IDP sites or their immediate surroundings, killing almost 30 people and injuring many more. What is sadly more is that gender-based violence does not stop to increase. For the whole year of 23, 122,960 cases of gender-based violence were reported, marking a 3% increase from 22. Female victims, including girls, accounted for almost 90% of all cases, with incidents of sexual violence against children increasing by 40%. This is solely the tip of the iceberg, as many cases remain unreported. Based on current trends, 24 risk becoming another, sadly, record year. The 2024 Humanitarian Response Plan, launched on 20th February 2024, seeks for $2.6 billion to provide humanitarian assistance to 8.7 million crisis-affected people. As of mid-June, the plan remained only funded at 26%. I thank Member States for their support and encourage them to provide additional support. In addition, I also call upon Member States and regional organizations to increase their efforts to reduce humanitarian suffering by strengthening their engagement towards political and regional solutions and by recommitting to tackle the root causes of conflict driving the dramatic upsurge of humanitarian needs. I welcome the 2 weeks humanitarian truce in Eastern DRC, which began at midnight on July 5th. I urge the parties to use this as an opportunity to inject fresh momentum into ongoing regional peace efforts.
Mr. President, distinguished members of the Council, as requested in Resolution 2717 of 2023, the Secretary General submitted to you a letter identifying the different possible options to support the Summit DRC, the mandate of which was endorsed by the Peace and Security Council of the African Union in March. I won't revisit the various options that were presented to you, but I would like to recall, as mentioned in the letter, that there won't be a military solution to this conflict and that peace will not be able to be reestablished unless there is a lasting political solution. I'd like to express my gratitude and wholehearted support for mediation efforts led by President of Angola, João Lourenço, between the DRC and Rwanda in the framework of the Luanda process. They need the full support of the international community, and here I would like to applaud the upcoming ministerial meeting of the Peace and Security Council of the African Union at the initiative of Angola to discuss the situation in the East. These regional efforts must be conducted in conjunction with the mediation efforts at the provincial and local level, aimed at facilitating the disarmament of armed groups in the spirit of the Nairobi process. As part of the implementation of its mandate, MONUSCO has continued to support the disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration efforts of the government, in particular in Ituri and in certain provinces of North Kivu, as well as the efforts linked to the reform of the security sector. In Lubero, in North Kivu, a reintegration project benefited over 1,800 former combatants. As part of the reform of the security sector, MONUSCO supported the establishment of a national unit in charge of coordinating the reform of the security sector under the auspices of the Special Advisor of the President. Mr. President, distinguished members of the Council, on the 25th of June, Prime Minister Judith Suminwa Tuluka and myself chaired the closing ceremony of the operations of MONUSCO in South Kivu, putting an end to 20 years of operations in the province. As you were able to read in the joint report submitted to your council, the disengagement in South Kivu took place within the established time frame thanks to close cooperation between the Congolese authorities and the mission by courageously tackling the security and logistical challenges jointly identified. I thank the Congolese authorities for their flexibility and pragmatism throughout this process. The joint evaluation report on the disengagement has made it possible for us to draw important lessons from this process, which will be very useful to the joint planning of its next phases. In parallel, the process of transition is continuing. A roadmap, that is a provincial transition plan for the province of South Kivu, together with a support plan of the UN country team, have been finalized. These plans identify priorities, available resources, and future needs. I encourage member states to fully support this transition, including financially, so that it goes smoothly. I would also like to underscore the important role played by the Peace Building Fund in the framework of this transition. In the context of the disengagement and transition, the acceleration of PDDRCS will require decisive determination on the part of the authorities to convince the armed groups of the need for disarmament, starting with the provinces of Tanganyika, South Kivu, Maniema, and Ituri, and until the end of the conflict in North Kivu, as well as a long-term commitment by the international partners of the DRC. The UN system, for its part, will continue to work closely with the authorities to ensure a technical and operational support for the PDDRCS. Mr. President, distinguished members of the Council, to conclude, I would like to share with you an extract of a poem written by the young people of Uhuru Knowledge Center, and which expresses very sadly the perils of being young in North Kivu and bears witness to the urgency of both national and international support. To live in inhumane conditions, walking endless kilometers, on a quest for peace, but at each halt it's war that reigns supreme. An infernal cycle of fleeing and bombs falling on the IDPs of Mugunga after this constant fleeing. Trauma and fear have become our daily companions. Villages burned, houses set on fire, the hearts of entire families shattered in Kishishe, in Bomba, in Kichanga, in Rubaya, in Kurochi, and Mugunga. Anger is boiling over. The more time passes, the more the impasse and the rhythm of violence settles in, while we would actually prefer to dance to the beat of justice, peace, and reconciliation. Those millions of children must return to their villages as they thirst to return to their classrooms. Synopes of the future, may these children be saved. We have a duty to listen to this Congolese youth and to support it wholeheartedly for the future of the country. Thank you for your kind attention.
I thank Ms. Keita for her briefing. I now give the floor to those.
Hi. In terms of opening remarks, I want to give you some flavor of some of the discussions that I have when I'm in the field with the communities and the women and the young people and the people who are locally the administrator of the territories. One of the things that they told me, which I said I'm going to say it in New York, and they asked me, pressed me to say it, is the following. In French, it is, Madame Keita, est-ce que vous pouvez dire à tout le monde que, au lieu de passer par la fenêtre, il faudrait passer par la grande porte. Alors ma première réaction, c'était fenêtre et porte. Et ensuite, les femmes m'ont expliqué ce à quoi ils faisaient allusion. C'est que Pour les ressources naturelles de la RDC, il est vraiment important que chacune se rende compte que ce qui se passe à l'est de la RDC, c'est vraiment problématique parce que l'exploitation illégale des ressources naturelles de la RDC, c'est un problème parce qu'il y a des gens qui meurent à cause de ça, il y a des gens qui sont blessés à cause de cela. Nous avons plus de 7,9 millions de personnes qui sont déplacées à cause de cela. Et rien que dans les provinces où nous sommes, on a plus de 6,6 millions de personnes déplacées. Et on parle d'enfants, de femmes, de personnes âgées, etc. So I decided to say that I want to be truthful to their ask and to tell you this. I don't know what you are going to do with it, but it's clearly that the global civil society has to be seized about what is happening in Eastern DRC. It's not acceptable in all accounts. And some of the part of my opening remarks in the Security Council today was to talk about a slum which was made by young people between 19 and 31 years old in Sake. So it's a territory which is known for being the theater of operations about M23 in DRC. And I hope I can share at some point the totality of the slum, because what I shared was just an extract of the slum. And for people who are listening and really listening and internalizing, you can feel the suffering and the despair of the people around the entire situation.
Thank you very much, Madam Heidler. Edith Lederer from the Associated Press. You said in your briefing how dire the situation is in eastern Congo, and yet there's a 2-week ceasefire that started January 5th. Is the ceasefire working? Is it having any impact? Has fighting diminished, or is the situation basically going on relatively unchanged?
Let me first welcome the truce. We are in few days from the Olympic Committee, and I recall that the truce was about the Olympic Games in one part of the world, which was Greece at some point, and it was a truce for 15 days for everyone to lay down their weapons and to engage in more positive activities such as sport. So I think it's very welcome, the truce for 2 weeks. My hope, and I think the hope of each and everyone, is for the truce to be continuing in a cessation of hostilities forever.
Hi, Sherwin Briceby, South African Broadcasting. SRSG, MONUSCO is leaving the DRC at the request of the national government. SAMI DRC is in there. They're not at full capacity yet, but losing troops in the process. What's the consideration and the equation that you're working at in terms of SRSG? Is it a good idea for MONUSCO to be leaving under these circumstances?
So, clearly, as we were discussing in the open session, there is a request from the Security Council, which was made back in December when we had our Security Council Resolution 2717, which says please, Secretary General of the United Nations, can you come back 30th of June with a letter which is going to examine the options in support of SAMI DRC, the regional force deployed in Eastern DRC. And in our view, it is important to provide support because in the same theater of operation, having the same goal, which is lasting peace in Eastern DRC, it is very important that this has been discussed in the open session, and we believe that at some point there will be a communication from the Security Council on this. Now, in relation to the disengagement of MONUSCO, we have signed a disengagement plan jointly, and I insist, jointly with the government. So it means it has been discussed with the government on and signed off on 21st November 23. It has been endorsed by the Security Council on 19 December with our Security Council Resolution 2717. And clearly what it says that we the MONUSCO are going to disengage from DRC from the 3 provinces where we were deployed back in December. And it will start with South Kivu, which is one of the provinces where we are deployed. And it's going to start in January, and it's going to end on 30th of June. And in spite of challenges, I say we, not MONUSCO alone or the United Nations, we, with the government, we have accomplished that. We have completed the closure of South Kivu on 25th of June with the Prime Minister presence in Kavumu, which is symbolically, we were landing at the airport and we did the signing of the implementation of the disengagement from South Kivu at the airport. So to say if this is a good time or not good time, I think in the open session, the permanent representative of DRC clearly said, we have done the best we could given the circumstances we were under. Now, it is very also important to acknowledge that it's not exactly where we want all of us the things to be, conform to the disengagement plan. So we will take time to consolidate what has been done in South Kivu with the understanding that the government is going to continue to increase its capabilities, particularly the deployment of the security services. And just for your information, and I'm sure maybe you already have the news, 400 police officers have been deployed very recently to increase the security services in South Kivu. And also, when it comes to the continuation of the deployment of security forces in South Kivu, it means that somehow there need to be a resolution of the situation in North Kivu, which is the situation with M23. So there is some correlation in terms of how you can allocate the resources available to you when you also have other priorities. So juggling different priorities means that it will take a little time for the increase in the number required for the protection of civilians in South Kivu. And this is a reality. And now, don't ask me what next. What next has been said. We pause, we prepare, and we see what comes next based on the realities on the ground, not on any fixed date or anything of this sort.
No, I mean, the follow-up is what next? Because does it mean you hunker down, stay as a possibility? I mean, the security situation is not where you need it to be, and MONUSCO leaving is not an ideal situation. Surely you can agree with that.
So when you say MONUSCO leaving, again, I told you 3 phases. Only one phase which has been termed in terms of timeline. North Kivu, no timeline. Ituri, no timeline. With the spirit and understanding that it has to be grounded on the reality on the ground, exactly what you have described. So based on that, today, it's very difficult to say, let's push forward. And this is not what the government is saying. The government is saying, let's pause, consolidate where we are coming from, and let's see the conditions in order to move forward.
Thank you, SRSG. Greg Walton, AFP. In the open session, US Ambassador Sullivan called quite explicitly for the Security Council to oppose any withdrawal from Nord Kivu. Is there harmony among Security Council members, particularly the permanent five, in that regard? To oppose any withdrawal, any timeline for any withdrawal from Nord Kivu?
Well, my sense is that we have to look at what the government, the host nation, is saying. And what the host nation has said is very clear. And it is in the public, because it was in the open session.
This show has been produced by Depictions Media. Please contact us at depictions.media for more information.